Welcome to day one of the Compassion and Therapy Summit. I'm Pamela Ayo Yetunde. I go by Ayo. I'm a pastoral counselor and a pastoral care and counseling professor, and I am delighted to be your host. In this session, I'm excited to be speaking with Deran Young, LCSW, and Dr. Richard Schwartz about their innovative work bringing an IFS, internal family systems approach to transforming the legacy burdens of racism into legacy gifts. Dr. Schwartz is the founder of the Internal Family Systems model of psychotherapy. He is currently on the faculty of the Department of Psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, and his most recent book, No Bad Parts, Healing Trauma and Restoring Wholeness with the Internal Family Systems Model, was released in 2021. Duran Young is a psychotherapist, co-author of New York Times bestseller, You Are Your Best Thing, a retired military officer, and the founder of Black Therapists Rock, which is a not-for-profit organization of over 30,000 mental health professionals committed to reducing the psychological impact of systemic oppression and intergenerational trauma. Thank you both so much for being here with us today. So, wow, I guess the first thing I want to know is what brought the two of you together?
You want to start with that, Deran?
Sure, yeah, I can jump us off. I came to IFS actually as a client. I am someone who went through a lot of trauma in my childhood. I was raised by a mother who was addicted to drugs in the 80s and 90s and a father who was in prison most of my life. And so being the oldest of three girls who kind of grew up in this very traumatic environment, I found that as I was navigating my life as an adult, I still had some pieces or parts of me that seemed to be stuck in the past. I joined the military at 18 years old, basically to escape poverty and homelessness. And I realized that I was still carrying those things with me despite not being in those circumstances anymore. So even though I wasn't homeless, I wasn't being traumatized, abused as a child, I was no longer struggling with poverty. I still felt like there was parts of me that were stuck in those environments and still coping in those similar patterns and those ways of being. And so I went through IFS, an IFS intensive program for trauma as I was leaving the military. And I just realized that I had done a lot of trauma work in my time doing as a therapist in the military, but I'd never found something that really got to the root cause of folks' trauma memories. I wasn't able to really tap into what are the original memories that are causing these problematic behaviors or patterns of being. And so as a therapist, when I found IFS as a client, I wanted to give it to more therapists of color and more to be able to spread it to communities of color because I felt like there was a very deep need for it.
So how did you meet Dick?
Yeah, so I reached out to Dick after having my own experience, my personal experience of healing from IFS, reached out to actually his brother, John Schwartz, who was the CEO at the time. And he told me that they had a very strong commitment to diversity and inclusion. And as the founder of Black Therapists Rock, we kind of worked together to create a pathway for more therapists to be trained in IFS.
All right, thank you. And so Dick, when Deran reached out to you, when you met for the first time, what did you think?
Yeah, we were thrilled. As Deran said, we had a big commitment to diversifying our community, which for many years was just really too white. And the idea of partnering or bringing IFS to Black Therapists Rock, which was a very dynamic organization that Deran had founded and full of amazing people, was just thrilling to me. And so I couldn't do the first training. I already had commitments. So a couple of our top trainers signed up to go and meet with the group originally. So I'm not sure when it was we first met, Deran. Do you remember exactly?
Yes, I do. We met at the IFS conference in 2018.
That's what I was going to say. That's what I thought. Yeah. And then in addition to being the bridge for these trainings with Black Therapist Rock, Deran, we collaborated with Deran in many different ways now. So Duran's been a huge asset to the IFS community.
Great. Well, I think having read your books, I am, in my body, I feel a lot of electricity around the power that I imagine the two of you bring, and the perspectives that you bring to healing. And so today we're going to talk about legacy and legacy burdens and the firefighter and how to heal, to go from a legacy burden to legacy gifts. But first, I want to say something about your books and how they impacted me. So I want to start with your book, Deran, Black Therapist Rock. Thank you very much for recognizing that fact. That's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say is I was really impacted by the stories. The stories are incredible. And you are, in this book that you compiled, you are, how to best put it? You are pricking a taboo. The taboo that says that therapists are supposed to be like a tabula rasa, or our lives are supposed to be private. Our clients are not supposed to know anything about us, especially the trials and tribulations. Why did you take this risk and prick that sacred cow taboo of secrecy?
Yeah, I think legacy secrecy is a strong component of legacy burdens often. So there is that legacy burden of, we don't talk about our problems, especially in the Black community. We don't talk about feelings, really. A lot of us, we've been trained to, just kind of put on the face and play the role. And I really felt like it was important when we talk about racial trauma. There's a lot of new studies exploring this topic, but there isn't a true picture of what racial trauma looks like. When we talk about what it means to be Black in America, most people don't have a real full grasp on how this is a mental health problem, how this could be a public health problem. And so I wanted to get other health professionals together who could talk about their lived experience, because there's so much wisdom in that. And when we do break that silence, that's where the legacy gifts can come in, when we're speaking our truth, when we're sharing what we feel is true to our experiences. That's how the legacy burdens start to lift.
Mm-hmm. And I so appreciate your appreciation for truth, because with each essay in this book, they get to put it in their own language, in their own words. You get the sense that each person here is an individual. They get to curse, they get to use whatever slang they use and talk about their life. So I really appreciate the fact that you allowed that, Deran. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dick, your book, No Bad Parts. Now, okay, I don't know if the two of you have talked about this, but to go from a mono mind to a multi-mind. My mother, who's Black, used to say, if I had followed my first mind, I would not have done X, Y, Z, right? But the thought of having parts and speaking to those parts is almost like, are you saying that I have the right to give voice to that which goes on internally? And Black people tend not to have that permission because of the risk of being pathologized and even criminalized. Can you say more, Richard, can you say more, Dick, about this taboo that you're also pricking into when you're working with Deran and the Black community?
Yeah, so in general, it's been a tough sell, this whole multi-mind paradigm, because having more than one mind has been so pathologized in our culture that what am I, a multiple personality, you're saying, or that kind of thing? So, and I think, as both of you are saying, as I'm learning about the Black culture, it's particularly scary to be very disclosive and then also to say anything that might lead someone to pathologize you. So yeah, I think that's a kind of protector resistance that is not uncommon. And again, not just in the Black community, but for example, a lot of men have this attitude that it's just not manly to go inside and to muck around in there and to talk about your vulnerable parts or any of that. Although the parts language, actually, when people get comfortable with it, does make it easier, because you can say it's a part of me that feels this. It's not all of me. And so once we can get past the initial pushback, people find it very useful to talk the language.
Okay. Well, then let's go with that then. We all have the protective parts, right? We all can agree with that across our differences, that there are parts of us that want to be protected. Can you talk, both of you, talk a little bit from your own experience about the dynamic of protection?
Yeah, I could talk a little bit about that. What comes to mind for me is the idea that W.E.B. Du Bois coined as double consciousness. When you're navigating the world one way, or you're having to navigate the world in a way that doesn't feel genuine or right for you, but this is the way that gets you access to resources. This is the way that people understand you. Maybe this is the tone or the language that people understand best. So you kind of mold yourself and you develop your ways of being in the world, kind of as like we said, multi-minded. As I know, especially as a Black person who's been through graduate school, an officer in the military, there was definitely a double consciousness at all times, wondering, what is the best way for me to be in this environment? And what would it be like, after IFS, I was able to discover what would it be like to have more choices? What would it be like to not feel compelled to behave in one way or another? What would it be like to have freedom and the ability to express who I truly am in the moments where that is safe? But when we talk about protection, I have to think about psychological safety. What feels safe? And what feels safe to me, given my circumstances and my place in an environment, may feel very differently to someone else. I also think about systemic oppression and how layers of oppression and marginalization may cause you to feel like, there's nowhere where you can be safe. And like Dick said, that it's not safe to talk about certain things. It's not safe to be as open to others. Self-compassion often feels like something that could be psychologically dangerous. People think that, if I have this compassion for myself, then I can't be strong. I can't be hardworking. That's going to mean that I'm going to give up on life, or I'm going to, feel sorry for myself. So I think there's many ways that we protect ourselves psychologically. It's important to think about what psychological safety means for every person individually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. I'm so glad you brought W.E.B. Du Bois into the picture, because the Souls of Black Folks, I think, came out in 1903, introducing this concept of double consciousness. And so it is within the Black community, it has been for a long time, the sense that there's more than one mind. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. Now, how to take that concept that's been around for a long time and apply it in a way that legacy can become a gift, right? So, Richard, I keep calling you Richard, I'm sorry, Dick.
It's okay, I answered to both.
Okay, all right. You are a master wordsmith, right? I'm sure you've heard that before.
Thank you.
Yeah, in everyday parlance, when we use the word legacy, we think about a gift, right? I want to leave a legacy to, fill in the blank. But in your work and the work that the two of you are doing together, you're talking about the probability or the reality that legacy can also be a burden. As it relates to racism, how is that the case? How is racism a legacy and then a burden?
Yeah, so as I started working with what we call parts, which are these little minds that, so it's not just double mind, but people have lots of different parts, it seems. What I found was a lot of the extreme ones are driven by what we call burdens, which are extreme beliefs and emotions that came into your system from some kind of a trauma or from bad parenting or something like that, and attach to these parts and drive them almost like a virus, like the COVID virus. And at first, I just worked with what we call personal burdens, which are what I just described. But as I continued, it became clear that some of these extreme beliefs and emotions didn't come from your lifetime, but in fact had been passed down the generations, either in your family or your ethnic group, or just are floating around in our culture that you absorb, racism being one of those, of course. And that for many people, it took a while to find those kinds of burdens because, you know, the fish are the last to know about water because you're swimming in it. You know, you just think that's the way the world is. And that when we would find those particular kinds of burdens that did come from sometimes traumas that happened centuries ago, or, you know, in the case of Black people, slavery, for example, that, you know, you're not, that they're very powerful. When you find a legacy burden and you can unburden that one, it has a big impact on somebody's life usually. And so that's become a big focus in the IFS community. And Deran and I have co-led a workshop on this topic, and was quite an experience to try to do something collectively to unload some of these legacy burdens. And so it's you know, it's a passion of mine now. Mm-hmm. And I'm, you know, again, it's one of the gifts I've gotten from our collaboration with Deran is to be able to do it multiracially.
Wow, you know, I'm just imagining the container and the capacity that the two of you must have to hold a container of a mixed race group, delving into the legacy burdens of racism that you posit in your book, Dick, that everybody in this culture anyway, in the United States, has a legacy burden related to racism. That's a pretty strong claim.
Yeah, that's what I found anyway. And I think Deran would agree with that.
Yes, I would definitely agree with that. I like the analogy of the fish in the water. And one thing I try to help people understand around this legacy of racism, when we talk about racism, it's historical, it's generational, it's persistent, it's institutional, and it's systemic. So when people ask me, what do you mean by white supremacy culture or racism? I mean that the fact that we live on a planet where most of the people who are, you know, who call this place home are Black and brown. Most of the global majority are Black and brown people. However, most of the resources and the access to things like education, economic resources, healthcare are governed and empowered by people who would identify as white or European descent. So to me, there lies the issue, you know, that most of the power and sources of power belong to one group of people primarily, and are not shared or distributed evenly. And so we have these power dynamics that play out in our lives each and every day. When we turn on our TV and we look at messages from media or marketing, they're typically geared towards one group of people. The education system here in America is kind of tailored towards one group of people. Someone pointed out to me, I think it was a lawyer or an attorney, who said, you know, one of the most racist institutions in America and one of the most powerful institutions in America is our law system, our legal system. And the legal system plays a role in everybody's life, whether you're aware of it or not. So I got really passionate about this context of adding, you know, history and generations and legacy to mental health. When I got a chance to go to Ghana, West Africa, during my time at University of Texas, and I really was curious, like, what is the biggest difference between the mental health of Africans on the continent and Africans in America, or Black people in America? What are the factors that make us different? And one of the things that I quickly realized is when the transatlantic slave trade was founded in Africa, or when, you know, the Europeans came in to extract Africans for profit, there was a loss of community. There was a loss of, you know, feeling pride about who you are, loss of identity, right? And so in that identity, I went back to Ghana to see what's missing there. What is it that we need to reclaim? And I think that community and collective support, that compassion for each other, is one of the biggest areas where we can really gain from. We can get a large legacy gift by learning, going back and reclaiming. The African word or proverb is Sankofa, to go back and reclaim what was lost.
Yes. Wow, that sounds like such a powerful experience and a transformative experience in terms of one's professional development, especially given, Black Therapist Rock. Black Therapist Rock should have a conference in Ghana. As someone who, is from Indianapolis and went to Zimbabwe, I know how powerful it can be. Okay, now back to you all. And I want to go back to the topic of this dynamic of the protector. And Dick, you named one aspect of the dynamic of the protector as the firefighter. Can you describe what the firefighter is? And then I would like to ask if the two of you would engage in a short role play to demonstrate this firefighter dynamic.
That sounds good. So when clients started teaching this to me, so I learned this model from clients. It didn't come out of my brain. So they started talking this language of parts, and come from a family therapy background, so I'm a systems guy, and I'm trying to understand how these parts related to each other rather than get to know them each individually. And the big distinction that leaped out immediately was between the parts of us that other systems call inner children that are very young and vulnerable and sort of open, and before they get hurt are playful, and they give us delight in life and creativity and joy and so on. But after you've been hurt as a person or terrified or shamed, they're the ones that take in the biggest, what we call burdens from those experiences. And then they carry that burden of terror or worthlessness or emotional pain. And when that happens, they have the power to pull us back into those memories, those scenes in the past, and make us feel as bad as we felt back then. And so almost naturally, we tend to try and lock them away in inner basements or abysses or cysts. So we call those exiles. And most all of us, and particularly people of color, have lots of exiles just growing up in this culture, because you experience so many, you have so many bad experiences growing up usually. So, and thinking that we're just moving on from the memories, sensations, emotions, and beliefs of the trauma, not realizing and doing that, we're locking away our most precious qualities. So those we call exiles. And then it became clear that to keep those exiles contained and keep them from being triggered and to protect them, other parts are forced out of their naturally valuable roles into becoming protectors, some of whom protect by trying to manage the outside world. So what you guys were talking about earlier in terms of a part that's trying to make it in a white culture and learn the rules and so on, that would be what we call a manager part, who's just trying to control the outside world so you don't get triggered, control your appearance so you look presentable, control your achievements. So these are all different parts that are doing this managing job. And often they become critics because they don't know how to get you to do these things other than yell at you. And they'll mimic your parents who yelled at you to get you to behave. So these inner critics are often of that class of protector. So they're all trying to preempt anything that might upset you or trigger you or bring these exiles exploding out in flames of emotion that could overwhelm you and keep you from functioning. And so generally they do a pretty good job, and but there are things that will trigger your exiles, and when that happens, it's a big emergency. It's like you're going to be consumed by these flames of emotion. And so there's another set of parts who are kind of on guard for that all the time, who immediately go into action to douse those flames of emotion or get you higher than they are or distract you until they burn themselves out. So we call those firefighters because they're fighting those flames of exiled emotion. And most of us have, if you have a lot of exiles, you're going to have some firefighters. And so some of them, you might guess by now, would be addictions and rage and things like that. But others are more socially acceptable. Like I have one that makes me work all the time, and it counters the part of me that feels worthlessness at times, and so on. So the difference between managers and firefighters is that in contrast to managers who are trying to keep everything under control and please people, firefighters take you out of control in general, very impulsive, and often piss off everybody. And yet all these, they're just protective parts trying to keep you safe in their different ways. So yeah, is that clear?
You know, like I said earlier, you are a wordsmith and a master at that. So for people who are hearing about IFS for the first time, it may not be that clear, but that's why it's so important to read No Bad Parts. By the way, I think you did an excellent job in breaking down a psychotherapeutic modality into lay terms.
Thank
so
you.
People, yeah, it's truly accessible. It's truly accessible. Okay, and that's why role play is important. Yeah. So that we can break down.
I'd also like to just give an example before we jump into the role play.
Okay.
Because I feel like this may help us kind of get started on this path today. But as Dick was talking, an example that came up for me is I have parts that like to leave, that physically will change locations. I was in the military for 18 years. I grew up in an environment and in a family where it was not uncommon for us to move multiple times a year. So I can, when things get really hard for me, I will look for another place to go. I will look for another country, another state, somewhere else that feels more safe than where I currently am. And an example of that, January 6th, 2021, the insurgents that happened on the Capitol. I live in the DC area. Now, I'm originally from Texas, which is typically a place where I don't feel safe because of all the political things that are typically happening in Texas. But at that time, I felt a lot safer in Texas with my family, and I was really afraid to come back home to my home here near the Capitol. So, like I said, going to Africa, I've been to 37 different countries, kind of looking for a place where I felt like I could belong and not be so on guard about my safety. And that I'm starting to realize that place doesn't exist. I kind of have to create that place internally. And that's kind of the gift of IFS, that it gives you other options when there's external constraints, when there's external limitations. How can you be at peace internally?
Thank you. Right. So oftentimes we're talking about racism as an external situation, but we also know that there's internal racism as well. And IFS is about the internal world, right? That is also exacerbated by the external situations that we find ourselves in. So I think I just wanted to underscore that for people who aren't that familiar with IFS. This is really about the internal system within ourselves that sometimes works as a saboteur, right? We articulate a particular dream, but something inside of us undermines that dream. What is that about? Yeah, that's just a short explanation. Okay, back to the role play. Do you think that you're ready to jump into a brief role play with a firefighter and racism and legacy burdens, all of that?
I'm happy to. You up for playing the client, Deran, or you want me to?
I am. I'm always up for healing.
Okay, good. So this may not be a role play, actually, but yeah.
Whatever serves.
Yeah, good. Okay, Deran. So, is there something you'd like to work on or get to know in there?
Yeah, I've recently discovered that there's a part of me, I'm not sure if it's a manager or a firefighter. A lot of times I don't think it really matters inside, as long, what you call it, as long as you can feel it. But I'm very much in touch with the part of me, especially since the pandemic, that has been socially isolating. And as I've been working with this part, it keeps telling me it's not safe out there. It's been saying that for a very long time, pretty most of my life. And I'm realizing that I've had to override that part, like being in the military, going to grad school, having to be, in the world. I had to, another part of me kind of overrode that part for most of my life. And now that I'm kind of approaching middle age and settling more in my life, this is a part that's gotten more of my attention lately, that, we want to be in the world, but it also feels like it's not safe to be in the world.
Sounds good. So you ready to work with that part?
Sure.
Yeah, so go ahead and focus on that feeling of the world not being safe, and find that in your body or around your body.
It's kind of hanging out in my shoulder and really my spine. I've been, like I said, been really working somatically with it, and I've just come into understanding of, like, it's also on my spine, like my ability to stand up for myself or to carry myself upright and be seen and visible in the world. It feels like it's a shoulder spine kind of thing.
All right, great. And as you notice it there, how do you feel toward it?
I don't know if these parts, like there's the shoulder part is fighting the spine part. Like I said, it feels like there's some they're constant like overriding. Like, this is the part that's like, oh, we got this. We can control the situation. We can make it say, we can do something, versus the spine is just like, we just want to be. We just want to be able to walk upright and exist.
Okay. Yeah. So there's two different parts then, and so which of those should we start with?
That's a good question. I'm wondering which one is gonna let the work happen, because the shoulder part, it feels like a hypervigilance, like I'm always on guard, gotta be watchful, gotta be careful. And the spine part is about being seen and having boundaries and having my needs met, it feels like. And although I would really like to work on the spine part, I feel like the shoulder part is like not wanting that to happen because it's so afraid.
I totally agree. So let's focus on the shoulder part and tell me how you feel toward that one, this protector.
To be honest, I really like this part. It feels really close to me. It almost feels like this is who I am. I make things happen even when I'm afraid, It's very close to my identity.
So let it know you really like it and you appreciate how much it's done for you in your life, and just see how it reacts to your appreciation.
Because I like it, and because like it's getting attention, it wants to do more. Like, it wants to grow bigger, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. But also ask it what it's afraid would happen if it didn't run your life so much.
Wow. That part thinks I'm gonna die.
Yeah. So how do you feel toward it as you hear that?
Feels like I might need some tissue, because the word terror really just comes to mind. Like,
yeah, it carries a lot of terror. Let it know you get that. And let it know it probably did save you from dying in the past. And we get that.
Yeah, I'm letting this part, I'm seeing and understanding why this part has been so afraid, because I grew up in a town where the KKK was very active. They had rallies and made gestures to, let us know that they were present, like burning crosses, and like that part is very aware of where I'm from.
So let it know that makes sense to you and to me. Just let it know we get that. that it would be terrified to grow up there. And to grow up there,
Yeah,
what?
it was pretty terrifying. Just
Yeah. And to grow up there with a parent who wasn't all there all the time.
just acknowledging that part helps me have compassion for it. That's
Yeah.
kind of where I'll steer his eyes. A
Yeah.
lot of compassion for what it's like to grow up
Yeah. So
as a
just
black girl in a place where the KKK is really active.
yeah. So just keep showing it compassion, letting it know we're getting this.
Mm. Yeah, she's been wanting to say that out loud, wanting to be heard
Yeah.
and witnessed, but she felt like there was no point. Like there's no point in talking about this because it's the world we live in.
Yeah. But right now, she has free reign to talk about as much as she wants, to let you get how terrifying that was. As much as she wants right now. Just let her know we really want to get it. And anything more she wants us to get about it.
Yeah, just that there's some sense of relief, like being able to give words to
Yeah.
to the pain, to what was there.
That's great. And she does feel like we're getting it?
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Mm. There's another part in my throat that just kind of swallowed down, and it's like, okay, I'll allow you to say what needs to be said.
Fantastic. Yeah. And ask this one if it's stuck in any particular place back there or if it's just the whole time period.
Yeah, there's this memory of us driving down a back road behind my grandmother's house on Halloween, and this big field in the cross that was burning there, and just how scared she was because there was this rumor that, you know, the KKK, if you went trick-or-treating, the KKK might kidnap you. So just seeing that scene right now.
And how old is that girl?
About 7.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell her to really let you get and feel and see and sense everything she wants you to about what that was like for her.
Yeah, she's looking out the window, and I'm kind of just putting my hand on her shoulder,
Good.
and she's just convinced they're gonna kill me.
Yeah. So you've already gone back into that scene with her now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, just let her know you get that she really thought she was going to die then. She was going to be killed.
Yeah, she's looking at me. She's surprised that I'm still here.
That's great. Yeah, let her know you made it. And that you're there with her. She's not alone anymore. And what's that like for her, to see you there, to be with you?
Yeah, she's still taking it in. She's really surprised that I stayed alive enough to be 39 years old and to be
Yeah.
someone's mom, to be a grown up.
Yeah, it's great. Duran, ask her if there's anything she wants you to do for her back there or with her, or if she just wants to leave that time and place with you now and come someplace safe.
Yeah, she said she doesn't want to be alone anymore. She doesn't want to have to face that alone.
Yeah. So is she ready to leave, or does she want you to do something?
No,
Okay.
feels like we can leave.
So let's take her either to the present with you there or to a fantasy place of her choice, wherever she wants to go.
There's a memorial grounds here of the Underground Railroad. I'm paying tribute to Harriet Tubman, and she kind of wants to go there.
Let's take her there and tell me when she's there with you.
Mm. I'm just holding her hand and kind of showing her this place.
It's great. So she'd like to stay there, but have you be with her there or visit
Yeah.
her anywhere? Yeah.
Right. And she's like, I can be here
Mm-hmm.
as long as you promise to come visit.
And what do you say to her?
I would definitely love to do that.
Great. So given that she can stay there and you'll take care of her and she never has to go back there again, see if she's ready to unload the feelings and beliefs she got back there.
Yeah, she likes it in this new place because she feels like Harriet Tubman was such a strong woman, courageous woman.
Yeah.
That she'll feel protected by the spirit and the energy of the ancestors there.
That sounds great. So is she ready to unload that stuff?
Absolutely.
And where does she carry that? In her body or on her body?
Yeah. Like I said, the shoulder.
Shoulders, yeah. And what would she like to give it up to? Light, water, fire, wind, earth, anything else?
Fire or wind, maybe both. Smoke.
Okay. So fire first?
Yes.
All right. So set up a fire for her and tell her to let all that out of her shoulders and into the fire. And then the smoke can just blow away.
That feels really nice.
Let's make sure she gets it all out of the shoulders. No need to carry that anymore, that terror.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
How's she doing now?
Really feeling at peace and a big sense of calm.
And she can invite qualities into her body now that she'd like to have and just see what comes in.
She wants to invite in hope.
Great. So how's she doing now, Deran?
Yeah, she's just kind of taking in this idea of how would it be to have a hope? How can we integrate this to really remember that we're allowed to have it?
And what do you say about that?
That I'll come there and we can talk about it. Like, what does hope look like in our life moving forward?
Beautiful. So does that feel complete for now? We don't have a lot of time left.
Yeah, that feels really, really complete. Really good.
Great. So So thank you, Parts, for letting us do this. And as always, it's just wonderful to be with you. And yeah, come on back here.
Thank you so much for leading me through that.
Yeah, it's really an honor to be with you to do that. It really felt great.
Thank you.
Is it okay if we hear from Ayo?
Yeah.
Yeah.
First, I got to put my hands together and bow because I was just and we were just part of something that was sacred healing. Sacred healing. The power of vulnerability. And now, Deran, I understand why you quoted, maybe why you quoted Brene Brown in your essay in your book. The power of your vulnerability is transformative. And I think it shows a lot of people that there's strength in it and there's healing in it. So thank you for your transparency. And Dick, thank you for being the person you are that would allow Deran to do this work. I think we all know that, many of us know anyway, that Black folks can't be in therapy with white folks because of sometimes with the fear of, if I say something about the ancestors or Harriet Tubman, well, how's that going to come off, right? And so thank you, Dick, for the work that you've done to be able to receive it and work with it. As we bring our time to a close, I want to ask each of you, how was that experience for you and doing it in this way in a summit context?
For me, I'm a big proponent of collective healing. And I would say that, cross-cultural relationships are so important if we hope to ever, gain the wisdom of healing racism in our hearts. I think that when we can be vulnerable, when we can show up and take that risk of connecting with someone who doesn't look like us, when we can kind of open our heart and make a little bit more space for our pain and that of the other person that we're with, it frees you up a little bit, and I really feel like I've gotten so many gifts being a part of the IFS community, even though, most of the people in the community don't look like me. They've given me love in a very special, a different way, a special way in a different way that's allowed me to trust people who don't look like me in a more deep way, in a healing way. And I think that that's something that those corrective experiences are really important as we talk about individual healing and collective healing.
Yeah, I always feel terribly moved and privileged and honored to not only work with Deran, but anybody, a person of color who trusts me enough to be that vulnerable. And, we have quite a history, Deran and I, and I'm proud to say that I think I've earned her trust over the years. And I totally get why there's such distrust of white people. And so, and for me, there's something about trying to give back or trying to, there's something healing for me to actually do this kind of work. And so anyway, yeah.
Thank you. There was a word that came to my mind as I was paying attention to the work that you were doing together. And this word is reparations.
Yeah.
A lot of folks, Black folks, believe that if we were to receive the proper reparations for the legacy of slavery, then that would solve everything. But your work demonstrated to me today that we don't have to wait on that.
Yeah.
That this work right here is a sort of reparations in and of itself that goes beyond a monetary value. And so thank you both so much for the work that you do individually, the work that you do collectively, for the writing that you put out there, for the stigma, for the destigmatizing work that you do that invites people in for healing. I'm very grateful. And thank you so much for being a part of this summit.
Thank you, Ayo. I also want to say it's gone both ways. So Deran did a very powerful session with parts of me in that same whatever workshop we led together. So it's been very mutual that way as well.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you. Pleasure to get to know you.